Hello, Professor. Today we'll be talking about chapters 5, 6, and 7 for my VCS submission. Let's start off by a discussion regarding the time value of money, where $1 now is worth more than $1 tomorrow, which is the basics of that specific concept. And it allows for potential growth, as you can see. And then, for example, 100 invested in savings account yielding 10% annual interest after a year will be worth $110 in the future. Therefore, this is how it allows you to increase your dollar today by investment, basically in the future. And then furthermore, looking into investing for more than one period. In this case, this is regarding compound interest, which enables the original investment to rise exponentially over time when investing over a number of periods. And what we've talked on the previous slide was regarding specifically the simple interest, which does not apply for every single year, and every single increase of your holdings each year. Basically, it applies only to that initial present value that you have invested. And then basically, for example, taking into account both the capital and interest gained, 100 invested at 10% interest rate after 2 years will be worth $121 instead of 120 with simple interest rates, which illustrate that specific example. When it comes to present value versus future value, present value is the current value of a future cash flow, whereas future value is the investment's value at a particular future time, which is most likely at the maturity date. And so the present value can be calculated using the formula future value divided by 1 plus r to the power of, where r is the interest rate and t is the time of your bond or security that you've purchased it for. And it allows you to calculate the present value. And the future value can be calculated using the present value multiplied by 1 plus interest rate to the power of number of years. And this is where you can see that relationship between present value and future value, as they're closely correlated between one another. And the key instrument in corporate finance for assessing investment choices is the basic present value equation, which is future value divided by 1 plus r to the power of 2. Now taking a look at present value and future values with multiple cash flows, which is where it becomes more complicated. So for example, using a $100 deposit scenario at 8% interest rate over a 2-year period, this example will show you how to calculate future value with numerous cash flows. So in this case, you can see how it changes over time and how you are able to have a specific increase, such as that, using this formula for future value. And when it comes to calculating present value example, for example, we know that we're going to have a future value of $2,000 in 2 years. And this specific bond has a 9% interest rate. And so this is how we would be able to calculate the present value, which is 2,000 divided by 1 plus 0.09, which is the interest rate, in brackets to the power of 2, which is the 2 years until the maturity date. And this way we'll be able to get an answer of 1,683.36 cents, which would be the actual present value for that specific bond. And then the significance of cash flow timing is emphasized with the implicit presumption that cash flows happen at the conclusion of each quarter in financial computations. And therefore, it is also used within the cash flow statements themselves as well. Now let's move forward towards the bond features and pricing. So in this case, governments and enterprises issue bonds to the public as a long-term means of borrowing money. And so this is how it would work. So bonds are usually interest-only loans, meaning that the principal is returned at the end of the loan term, and the borrower pays monthly interest rate. And it has a face value or par value, which is another way of calling it, which is pretty much the value of a bond at maturity. And it's not necessarily correlated with or the same as the present value or the future value, because it is the fixed value of that bond initially. While present value and future values, both of them can react to interest rates and credit ratings, maturity dates, supply and demand dynamics, call features, and convertibility, as you can see from the picture below. And then there's also a coupon rate, which is an annual coupon divided by face value. And there's coupons, which are the regular interest payments that the bondholder is receiving or the bond issuer is paying. Now taking a look at bond values, yields, and interest rate risks. So we're here when it comes to the bond valuation. It is variations in market interest rates, which affect a bond's value. So the price fluctuations of bonds with fixed cash flows are inversely related to changes in interest rates, as I mentioned previously. Therefore, if the interest rates go up, you technically are losing money by holding your bond at a lower interest rate. While if the interest rates go down, you're the one that benefiting from it, and you are receiving it at a premium. And therefore you are basically making more money than other people who just got the most current bond with a lower interest rate. Therefore, it is important not to have long-term bonds with huge and long maturity dates while you are anticipating an economic decline or downturn, in order to be able to adjust for those interest rate fluctuations. And then moving forward, there's the yield to maturity, which is a term used to assess the market value of a bond by discounting its cash flows, and it indicates the market interest rate necessary on the bond. And so over here, we can see one of the examples from our course book, where the second bond now offers $80 per year for 9 years, the present value of this annuity stream at 10%. And then we would be able to calculate its new annuity present value, which is going to be $460.72. And we can also now add the values for the two parts together to get the bond's value, the final bond's value. But previously, prior to this equation, they've also calculated the present value, the initial present value, and then added that all together in order to calculate the actual total bond value. And this way we will be able to see the $884.82. And this would be seen as so currently, if you were initially receiving 1,000, this would now be seen as a bond at a premium. Because, for example, in this case, it could either be that the coupon rate went down or the interest rate went down, and therefore you're now receiving more. But if you were to be exposed to the lower interest rates, this is the number that you would be getting. And also that's the number that you will be technically losing if you are not going to keep your bond that you currently have right now at the moment. And then lastly, it's looking at the debt versus equity and long-term debt. Over here, debt versus equity, it is important to understand the differences between debt and equity securities, where debt is the term for borrowed money that needs to be repaid, while equity is the term for ownership interest. And moving on, there's also hybrid securities, where certain securities combine debt and equity, which could attract legal attention. And companies may design hybrid securities to take advantages of bankruptcy protection and tax benefits. Therefore, it would be more closely monitored and looked at by other organizations. And moving on, looking at the features of long-term debt, these are securities with long maturities, which guarantee both principal repayment and on-time interest payments. And maturity, security terms, seniority, repayment choices, call clauses, and protective covenants are some of the important characteristics within those specific bonds that are also important to understand in order to read the bond and being able to immediately analyze it. And then looking at the real versus nominal rates. For example, in this case, when examining interest rates and financial market rates, it is crucial to comprehend the differences between real rates, which are adjusted for inflation, and nominal rates, which are not adjusted for inflation. Therefore, by looking at a nominal rate, you might not be able to have the most accurate analysis of the rate that you're going to be receiving. Because, for example, if we take the current inflation rates in the current economy that we're currently staying at, it would be very important to utilize the real rates instead of nominal in order to fully being able to understand the economical situation as well as your willingness to purchase a specific bond or security, depending on the inflation rates, the economical downshifts or upshifts, in order to avoid those interest rate fluctuations and other characteristics that are impacting the bond prices, which would allow you to stay on track with your finances and more specifically have more successful, effective, and productive investments. And yes, thank you for listening to this presentation. Here are my references. Thank you and goodbye.